Hey everybody, this is Kevin Daleen, and I'm excited to welcome you to my podcast called Shop Talk, where we're going to interview local entrepreneurs and community leaders to hopefully get actionable insights on how they've built their lives and their businesses that you, the audience, can take with them and hopefully implement into your life and your business. Well, Dad, thank you for being our inaugural guest on Shop Talk.
My pleasure. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So for those who don't know you, you're obviously my father. You're the CEO of AppSuite and also the co-founder of our business here, Daleen Restoration. And you've had a pretty expansive career. You started off in the trades, and then you've ran multiple tech businesses, even a restaurant. So what I'd like for you to do is see if you can fill us in on your background, tell the guests about how you started in the trades and got to where you're at today.
Sounds good. That journey began when I was about 8 years old. My father was an electrician, and he used to take me on his jobs, and I was his gopher. And it wasn't long after, when he was just doing electrical work, he became a contractor. He bought a company and became an electrical contractor. And of course, growing up around that, you get a good sense for what's going on, what it's like. And I continued to help him, and I worked for him when I was even before high school in the summers, and really got an appreciation for what that was like, and picked up some good work ethics, because he was a hard worker, and taught me that as well. I was a very hard worker, and as I went through high school, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and my father said, "Well, you could do this," and I said, "All right," and I took an apprenticeship in the Chicago area in Local 701, and became an electrician. Started working for my father. So I enjoyed it. It was something that I had an aptitude for, and I certainly spent time honing my craft, learning things, and I took a lot of pride in the quality of work I did. And we began to move the business forward. And then around 1980, you're too young to remember this, but
Wasn't born yet.
there was a terrible recession at that point. It was devastating to the U.S. economy. Interest rates soared to like 21%. And actually, my dad's business almost failed entirely. I became his last employee, and I was just hanging on. So it didn't look like there was much of a future at that point. So I went back to school, and I was going to potentially be an attorney. So I went to school for that, and began to pursue that. Within a couple of years, though, the economy started to bounce back, and I had a decision: do I go back to electrical work or finish my college degree? And I decided to go back to electrical work. I did that for a couple of years, worked for other companies. My dad got into a different business. He wasn't doing electrical, he was doing construction at that point. So I decided to pursue that for some time, and then I decided to start my own company. Surprise, right? Now, along the way, I had this entrepreneurial flair from the beginning, because my dad kind of instilled that in me.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, that kind of pride that comes from it. I just loved that. I could see what it brought, and it brought other things that weren't always great. There was a lot of stress, but I decided to begin to pursue that myself. So I first started with a sound company. I was a sound engineer. It was my first kind of hobby business, but I did sound for bands, and had a company, and did some pretty big bands in the Chicago area as a side hustle while doing electrical work. Did that for a couple years on the side, and got tired of working with band members.
Not the easiest
Yeah, I
clients.
turned that into a DJ side hustle. But all along, I was building my business, and I ended up actually for a while working as a contractor to my father, but then grew that business and became fairly successful in that area. I grew the business to be a rapidly growing electrical contracting firm in the Northern Illinois area.
Was that Sound Impulse?
Sound Impulse,
That was
yeah.
the first
So-
iteration of Sound Impulse.
Yeah. So along the way through the mid 80s, so take you on a journey. We're in the mid 80s now, and I'd gotten married to your mother, and I convinced her to take the money from the wedding and invest it in the business. So she trusted me, and I put that money into growing the electrical business. And it did grow, as I just mentioned. So that was an exciting thing. And then all along, I was still doing the disc jockey work, and it was fun. Your mom did it with me. So what happened at that point is that we're growing the business, but I could see that it needed change, right? And this is the connection to how do you get to tech, right? How do you
From
go
a trade,
How do you go
yeah.
from the trades to tech? Well, intellectually, I was looking for something more, so I decided to take a look at the electrical business first and say, what does it need, right? Because it clearly lacked some tools to manage profitability, job costing.
What year is this?
This is 1987, 88.
Okay.
So I didn't know anything about technology. So the only thing I did know is that you needed a computer to do it. So I ended up going online or it wasn't even online. It was a magazine.
You went on Amazon?
That was online back then, and bought and found a Packard Bell computer. It was like just at the time state of the art, but it was, a pretty basic computer by anybody's estimation. Anyway, long story short, I got it and realized I couldn't do anything with it. I didn't know what to do. So I started, asking around, and we learned how to do a spreadsheet and built some tracking systems and through spreadsheets. Long story short, I got really excited about what was possible. I ended up finding a consultant, and then this consultant started to open my mind what was really possible with software. And I worked with him to build a system, for lack of a better way to explain it, was like QuickBooks back then. We built a system that had everything, the payroll and job costing and accounting and all of that. And we built it, and it just changed my life. I was so excited about this. I began to get involved with it, learning how to program in it and do things. So I was convinced that this was my future, and I decided to start a business and convinced that consultant to join me in an endeavor to start a new company, which at the time we called ISSI. It was Innovative and Selective Software. So I start that business, funded out of the profits from my electrical business, and then I kind of turned over the reins of that business to one of the chief people that was working for it. His name was Gint Rachunas.
I know Gint.
Yes.
Uncle Gint.
Uncle Gint, yeah. He's working with AppSuite right now. He's a co-founder with AppSuite. So anyway, he takes over and runs that while I pursue that business. Well, that business had some ups and downs like every business does.
The software one?
The software one, yeah. We were a consulting firm initially. I was going to try and build this thing that we built for our company into a product. That was really my vision. But we needed cash flow because it takes a lot of money to build software. So we were doing big consulting projects in the telecom industry, some very large ones. Started off with a $500,000 one, then a $2.5 million one. Well, in the process of doing all this, I realized that the gentleman that I partnered with really wasn't cut out for this. He couldn't handle the stress and the ups and downs. So we had a moment in our history where we needed to resolve the fact that he wanted to shut the business down because he couldn't take any more of this. So I bought him out, and this was in 1992. And in that moment, I took over the business and was able to save it. At the time, I ended up closing this multi-million-dollar contract with Ericsson Telecom in Sweden. I ended up owning the business, and that's when we moved to Florida.
Where I started.
Yeah, exactly. You were actually born in Florida, but we moved to Florida because that's where our employees were. So at that point, we're moving into the early 90s, and the electrical business was still moving along. Mid-90s, decided to sell it. So I sold that business to a gentleman in the suburban Chicago area and focused 100% of my efforts on the software business. That was quite a journey. It was stressful. It was ups and downs. And by the mid-90s, decided that it was time to focus back on products. And I decided that the product of choice was this billing system. There was an opportunity in the telecom industry through deregulation to build a new generation of billing products and customer care products, because as they deregulated and opened up the telecom to things like the internet and cellular and wireless, they were all coming together and offering these things as a bundle. But none of the systems were designed to do that.
Were you still doing products at that time, or were
No,
you
we were
just
doing
consultants?
consulting, and we built some billing products for people like AT&T and some of the Bell companies we did some work for, and Siemens.
But you guys weren't a product company at that point, so you had to change.
We had We had an idea that we could be, but we needed to make a decision to do that because the consulting business and product business compete with each other.
Yeah.
You at some point you can't do both.
You got to delineate the two,
because you get a big project and it takes all of your best people to fulfill that, that means you can't push your products forward. So it really became a thrashing in the business. So I made a very important decision in 1995 to decide to abandon the consulting. It was scary because it was the
That's
only
all your revenue,
all
right?
revenue, right? Well, luckily I was able to work with some investment bankers and raise some capital. So at that time we raised about $3 million through a private placement. And we worked with a company in New York called Laidlaw. It was a banking firm, and we took money from, well, back up just a touch. My dad and mom lent me some money to be my very first investor, friends and family money. So I did take that. And so anyway, after that, we needed a lot more. We raised $3 million. We went through that money. And then luckily enough, I got introduced through a friend of our CFO to Solomon Smith Barney, which helped us raise some money. And eventually I did a venture capital round and raised $15 million from a group of venture capitalists. And that changed the business.
That was the rocket fuel?
Yeah, it was the rocket fuel, exactly. And we did a follow-on offering, and the business, we could build the product out. We started getting product sales. And then we raised some more money strategically from a big defense company called SAIC. They put in like $5 million, I think, $5 million bucks. They're the ones that bought Bellcore, which is the R&D arm of the Bell companies back then. So anyway, we're starting to really go and decided at the time we were going to go public because it was the way to go at that point. IPOs were hot. We were a hot company.
This is what year? 90?
1998, 99. So
right. I was just born.
Yeah, exactly. We were just born. And then, so we decided that that's the journey where we want to take, and we're going to raise money doing that. So we decided in 1998 to begin that process and kind of build a company with that mindset, get our books audited and do all the prep that we needed to do to make sure that the sales visibility was good. You don't want to go public if you can't continue to grow your business.
Yeah.
So by 1999, we start working on a prospectus, which is our S1, the filing you need to go public. We find an investment banker, Robertson Stevens, which was kind of one of the top tech bankers, was going to be our lead banker. And then we worked with a couple other prestigious firms, as they say on your cover. And we ended up going public in October of 1999, and it was a fantastic year to go public. 1999 was one of the hottest IPO years in history. We took the company public on October 1st, actually, and within 60 days, we grew to over $1 billion market cap, and it was just an incredible ride. Our sales were exploding. It was just amazing, and it was quite a good ride. So, as all things in life, things change, right? And what happened then is the internet blew up, .coms, and luckily we weren't being fed by .coms, but what people don't know is at the same time the .coms blew up, the telecom industry melted down because they were being fueled from the deregulation by money. Incredible amounts of money were being poured into that industry. And when the market turned, they cut off money to that industry like just turning a spigot off.
It was just done.
Well, nobody could. I didn't even see it as the CEO. I didn't really realize that the money had stopped. So in 2001, we're fifth quarter being public. We had just hit our fifth number in a row with beaten expectations. That the end of that era, we started getting an idea that the quarter we were in, we were going to miss our numbers and missing them badly. All of a sudden, nothing would close.
And now it's having an open veil when you're public, right? Everybody knows this. So
yeah, it's
and
terrible.
They're expecting you to hit X, Y, or Z.
The only
right?
cover is every other company was.
That's good, right?
It was
good.
Carnage everywhere, but doesn't mean it's any less bad for us. So.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is tough. This is really tough because we had grown globally. We had offices in Europe. We had offices in Canada, and we were in Boca, Florida, and in Atlanta, and all of a sudden, this rapidly moving, this airship that was cruising, all of a sudden is run into a lot of turbulence, right? So I have to go through a tough period of cutting and trimming back, and meanwhile, we were losing like $8 million a month. It was like, thinking back on that was just crazy. So we had to cut expenses. We had to raise more money. And I did all of that. It was really, really a tough thing. These are human beings we're talking about. it was gut wrenching, you know.
You had physical, this is a part of the story that I know. The other stuff, I learned a lot right there. But you had physical issues that happened from it, right? So much stress. You had Bell's
Well,
palsy.
that was another, no, that you're right. That my mom was dying at that time. And you're right. That stress did bring on a bout of Bell's palsy, the stress from it. It was a terrible thing. It was caused some facial paralysis but it was terrible. You know, I internalized this because I care about people. And like one of the underlying things that led me into entrepreneurialism is the desire to build a business that was based upon principles that I thought were critical to success, you know. And one of those was, the golden rule. And it's, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. But the principle that I always wanted to put myself in the place of the people that I would have working for me and making sure that I would make this a great place for them to want to be at. Because I knew that the success for business had to do with inspiring people, informing them, and making them feel part of something greater than just themselves. So I did that and followed in those footsteps in everything I did. So when it came to a point where I had to affect people's lives, it was terrible for me. But you had to do it. I mean, so you did it with care and class. You got to do what you have to do to survive.
It's business, but you got to, you're taking it personally at the same time.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, these are human beings, that were inspired to be there, but people understood, but it was still terrible, you know? But anyway, we get through that, and it took 4 major cuts. They call them RIFs, reduction in force. But we got there, raised $27.5 million more money, and then another $5 million. Eventually, I sold that business to a private equity firm called Quadrangle, and then I exited the business after a transition period and took a hiatus. I needed a
recalibration.
It didn't last
that
long.
was, what is that? I mean, from start of real career, you're already in the workforce 20 years building businesses, right?
Exactly. That's about right. That's about 20 years into it, and now we're talking about 2003. And I'm taking a break. I stayed on as a consultant until mid 2003.
That's when we moved here to Lake Geneva, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
We had a house down there where you were born at, and then sold that. And I had an apartment I rented for a while I was consulting, and then got out of that, and we moved to Lake Geneva, which was a home we had built in 2000 when things were going well. We ended up living there. So anyway. During that period, I'd taken a little break, recharging, I was all of a sudden immediately filled with this need. I had extra energy as I got out of that, in the game so much. So I started something that was a hobby. It was a sound reinforcement company. I built PA speakers, if you remember that.
Building them in the garage.
Yeah, and thinking about that is like I just needed to pour my energy into something else, and following a passion, and designed and engineered a line of professional audio speakers. Didn't have any experience in it, but I figured it out.
You were a DJ, right? You had a little experience.
Yeah,
you knew what good sound was.
I knew the industry. But so I didn't have any experience engineering speakers, but...
You were a carpenter, electrician, you liked music, it all kind of...
So it didn't take long after being on the bench for a while, as I got connected through one of the venture capitalists that funded Daleen Technologies was the name of the company that we took public. He brought me into a company that was doing a search for a CEO, and I had never done anything but entrepreneurial work.
Yeah.
This was more of a professional thing where I was going to be coming in and turning around a company from a founder. But he felt like I'd be a good fit for it. I was able to connect with the founder. He kind of understood me, knew I had some empathy and understanding for people like himself. So I was selected and came into a company called Affinity Express in late 2003. So I wasn't even on the bench a year, and I'm off.
That was a break.
Yeah, it was a little break, and I'm off to do that. And that company was in a totally different industry. At the time, they were in college and university bookstores, and taking their brands and building them into bookstores to sell their products. So they would basically run their websites and sell all their branded products for the biggest universities in the country.
Okay.
Ohio State, Harvard, you name them. They were all our customers. But that was a business that was beat up by the .com thing. So it was kind of a .com business that was sexy, took a lot of venture capital money in. And like everybody else, when the money dried up, they were like, what do we have here?
Yeah.
So I come on board, and there's all this stress, and I'm brought in to save the company, right? So here I am.
You go from a break to immediately
to
very
turning around
stressful.
another
Yeah.
mess.
Yep.
So anyway, I join and I come to find out it's a real mess. And I didn't know this. I don't think the venture guys knew this, but when I joined the very first week, I realized we didn't even have enough money to make payroll. So the first thing I did was I had to lend the company money to make payroll while I worked with the venture capital
To get the money.
from them. It was like a mess. But anyway, long story short, I was able to turn the business around. I got us out of that old business. I recapitalized it because the stock options employees had were all underwater, and refixed all of that, and got us into an industry that was ripe for growth, which was business process outsourcing. They call it BPO. So it was outsourcing the functions of doing, like for us, it was like artwork for promotional products. We also did advertising. We did the designs for advertisements for newspapers, and
You guys did embroidery too, right?
yeah, we did. We had a big embroidery business, which was a holdover from. That's where our founder of that company had come from, in
So
the
he had a
embroidery
background in there.
business. So we decided that was a business that hadn't really been tackled by business process outsourcing. So we had an operation in India and began to scale that, and grew it into a substantial business, and signed some major clients. The largest direct mail company, the largest newspaper chains in the United States became our clients. And along the way, grew it a lot, but found that the early investors were getting fatigued, because now they've been in there for 5, 6, 7 years.
They want out, right? They want to.
Well, I'm like, maybe they don't want out, but they're not willing to put more money in. Now
Yeah.
I need more money to grow this thing, but do they want to subordinate underneath some new investors?
Yeah.
So I was like, guys, we have a decision. Do you stay in the business, put some more money in along some new investors, and be prepared to do this for a number more years, or do we sell it and turn the reins over to somebody else? So we decided to sell it. So I presided over a sale of the business, got an investment banker, got in there and had to go in and clean up the business and get the books right and all of that, and successfully sold it. Although it was challenging.
Yeah.
Because while we were selling that business, some of the wheels started to come off the bus, you know, because I needed money to fix some of the bigger problems we had, and I didn't have the cash. And luckily, I was able to keep things in a good state. And then we brought a big new investor. It was a private equity firm out of the Philippines, and they had the money and the commitment to this industry to stay the course. So I successfully sold it, got our investors all their money back, and all the new investors that had come in there made a lot of money. I was very proud of that chapter because it was a mess.
You went into a burning ship and had to get it.
But that really burned me out. You know, I once again, I had just so much stress, and I was able to get it done. Very proud of it. Stuck around for another year and transition.
What's the timeline? So you started that in 03?
03, and then the December of 06 was closed. The transaction closed, and then I left a year and a month later.
Sometime in 07.
Yeah, late
How do
07.
you the thing that's interested me about stuff like that is you go from tech into a business that was doing originally, what was the product that Affinity was doing?
They were doing college, university bookstores.
Yeah. So you go from that, and then you got to transform the company into how they're doing printing and embroidery and things like that. How do you go about trying to retool yourself to run a company that's in an industry that you've never been in and probably don't know anything about at that time, right?
Yeah. So it's challenging, right? I mean, I'm always intrigued and energized by something intellectually new, but you know, it takes time. You know, the outliers thing, the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
It's true. It takes time to master it. So you surround yourself with people. And I brought in consultants. For instance, I hired a consulting firm who could help me take a look at the industry and put some eyeballs on it, you know, and that was really helpful. In fact, as we worked together and really analyzing the market we were in, we decided, you know, they helped me understand where we could go with what we had. How could we transform this into something different and grow it? So we arrived at, that's where we decided to go after the newspaper industry and the printers, commercial printers. And so working with other people who have knowledge of the markets we're in helped me. So I didn't just lean on just my own experience.
Because that's the part, like, especially serial entrepreneurs who've done things in way different categories. I think about starting our restoration business here. I had to dive so deep into this industry and learn as much as I could without even ever working in it. And then for somebody to do that and go into an organization that's existing with confidence to lead them in that direction, that part, is hard for me to comprehend, how you can retool yourself, especially, in the middle of a career. You know what I mean? It's impressive.
It's challenging, but it worked because I think it first focused on the employees and the culture, that was dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
And I went over to India and spent time with that operation and built some trust there and really worked closely with the people
Mm-hmm.
and built a culture that I knew that could help us through this tough period. Because if you don't have the commitment of your team through these tough times, you're never going to make it.
Yeah.
They're going to abandon ship. They're, oh my God, this is never going to work. We better go.
Yeah, you're going to be in the middle of retooling the business and then losing all your labor force. That's,
and you can't do both, right?
Yeah.
So you focus first on stabilizing. The very first move was to get the finances right.
Mm-hmm.
Did that with the venture capital firms. That wasn't easy, by the way, because when they learned the mess we had, they were reluctant.
Oh, okay.
I had a meeting in Boston with the venture capital firm. I'm going to leave their name out of this, but they were at some point were like, they weren't even sure. And I realized, I'm looking at them like, you guys brought me into this.
Yeah,
you hired me, and I have my money in this business. And I basically called them out. I said,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to put your money in this business, or you're going to have big problems.
Yeah.
And they did, but it was a moment. It really was.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I need you guys. This is your problem.
Yeah. Yeah. They sent you out to the wolves.
So anyway, that was some of how we did
Mm-hmm.
that and got through that. And of course, I'm in it 3-4 years. You start to gain your own experience and knowledge over the time. And we hired a lot more people from that industry as well. But anyway, that business sold. I got out of it and I took another break, right? And then I ran into an ex-employee of mine. I was down there on spring break in Florida. You were there.
I remember this vacation specifically.
We had a dinner with his name was Jamie Kramer, and he and his partner.
Not the guy from CNBC.
No, he had been building a consulting firm in Oracle consulting firm for years with his partner Ali Safadi, and their challenge was they built this profitable, nearly $10 million a year business, but they couldn't figure out how to scale it, and they wanted to sell it, right? So they knew I had a lot of experience in doing both of those things. So I started initially just consulting with them to see if I could help them fix some of their problems, understand first, seek to understand, then be understood. But then I said, listen, I even went out there and represented the business to some potential buyers and started to get feedback. How did they view the company? And I came back to them with a blueprint. I said, listen, here's your problems. I said, number one, you have a workforce that's entirely made up of contractors. And in a business of consulting, your intellectual property is your employees, right? So this isn't gonna work.
Because they can just leave.
And they couldn't figure out, how do you scale a business with two brilliant founders, right? When they did all the selling, and they then when they sell something, they had to deliver it. And every time they get going with sales, they were sucked back into the operation to deliver the projects, and they could never really gain any traction with that. So I explained to him, I said, we have to break the code on that. And I gave him some ideas on how to do it. And but I said, I don't think we could sell it right now, but we fix these things. It's a good business. Definitely could sell it if we fix these things. So instead of just taking that advice and doing it, they said, how about you join us?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that didn't cross my mind.
Yeah.
So long story short, I really admired these guys, brilliant guys. And I thought, what a team this would be. So I became the CEO, but I was really more of a partner to these guys. I had the CEO moniker. I helped them understand how to disaggregate the functions that they did into separate departments so that we could replicate success. Because trying to find people with their skills,
few and far between, right?
That is a really rare skill set.
That's something that you're gifted with, because you've helped that in our business together, as well as not to be caught on the hamster wheel that a lot of small businesses are on, where it's, sell the job, do the job, sell the next job, right? And it's you gotta build systems and repeatability with it. And
and you've taken that and done a great job here at figuring out what are those functions, what are those people, how do we how do we break this down and create a system that scales?
Yeah.
Not people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it's fine if you want to be in that realm, but if you don't want to be, you got to learn that skill, right? If
Exactly.
if you want to start to grow it, or you're not in charge of every aspect of the business, that's something you need to learn.
It is. Yeah. And it's not something that typically you get right immediately. It's just like anything in business. It's a continual learning process. You chart a course, you start heading down that course, and you make some decisions. You're decisive, right? You got to make a move, but you're going to get feedback from that. And typically half of what you think is going to work doesn't work if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But it's, correcting course and how quickly you can learn from that process, because great entrepreneurs are great problem solvers, and it's all about problem solving, and getting to the right formula for success is going to be having a great concept of like, what is the problem you're trying to solve in general, the market you're going after, but then building a scalable business is about problem solving, figuring out where you should go, and then continually getting feedback from what you're doing to refine it till you've got a system that scales. So anyway, I came aboard there and started doing all the things that I promised that I could do, and they listened and we did great. We built an employee workforce, so we had 100% of contractors. We eventually grew that to a 70% employee, 30% contractor blend, but it took time, took years to do that. We also decided that you couldn't have people with that level of skill sell like they have, but we could hire practice directors. We started looking at the different functions that we were selling, the consulting that we were selling, and the products that we were selling with Oracle, and we decided to build product directors or practice directors, that was what they called, that understood the domains we were selling in. And then they would get involved in supporting the sales process. And then we built an implementation function. And the next thing you know, we've got a system that scales, that aren't dependent
not
on...
just not people, right? It's,
Not, the business is trying to find more Jameses and Alis.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we started to be able to replicate that success. And we had to build a recruiting department and, accounting functions. We had to build the corporate infrastructure, but we did all that, and boy, did it grow. So what was interesting is I started that, my first day was October of 2008, which was an infamous time.
That's a good...
That was when the markets, we thought the end of the financial world was happening. The whole housing thing was blowing up. Luckily, our clients were in the defense industry,
so they're
manufacturing.
relatively insulated from it, right?
Yeah, we actually got through that, and while we had some nervous times, we did navigate through it. So it gave me the cash flow and time that I needed through all that to make these changes with my partners. And 2 years to the day, October 1st of 2010. I sold the company.
So you built that labor force and those systems and all that, and
very quickly.
Wow. Yeah.
And we were acquired by a public company out of India called KPIT Cummings, and they bought the business, and they were looking for a business in the manufacturing industry that did Oracle consulting. And I actually managed that whole process. We didn't have an investment banker because we weren't looking to be sold. It was an unsolicited bid. And I worked with our attorneys and accountants and got it done.
Wow.
And they were very happy. And I was happy too, because I was an owner. I invested in the business with them. So that was a great ending. And they were very happy. And then I stayed on for 2 years because we had an earnout, which is related to when a purchaser wants to buy a company, that they know that a lot of their value is pent up in the ability for them to own and operate the business after you sell it. So they tie the purchase price, at least portion of it, to how you perform in the time after they acquire.
Because you can polish up your books and get really nice and pretty looking from a financial standpoint, and then they get it, and it just...
Yeah, all the employees leave or whatever, the clients
You and I have looked at businesses where that was the red flag in it, right? It was like, we could do this, but it's probably, as soon as we acquire it, everything's going to fall apart.
It could.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a high risk of that.
Yeah.
And then you either have to discount the purchase price so much that they're probably not willing to pay.
They're not going to sell it. Yeah.
Exactly. Because they don't understand that.
Yeah.
They think of things from the owner's perspective.
Yeah, which I get it, right? You get an ego about it. It's like, I've built this, put a lot of time, energy into it, but if somebody else can't buy it, it still operates, it's not worth anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, along the way, we delivered those results because we had a 3-year earnout. And good news is that we hit the 3-year numbers in 2 years, and got all of our money in 2 years instead of 3. And then because it was based upon performance, and then I left after that period of time. And
all right, folks, that's all the time we had for this episode. We're gonna end it here, and hopefully catch you on the next one.